There's seats up front for anyone who needs a seat. Hello? There's seats up front for anyone who needs a seat. Come on down front if you want. There's seats up here. Okay, everybody, there's more seats up front for anyone who needs them. We're just going to go ahead and start the meeting. There's also chairs being handed out in the back if you'd like. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Pam Rogers. I'm your school board president. Welcome. Thank you so much for getting involved tonight. Unfortunately, I believe that some of you are here because you heard a rumor on Facebook that we're grade banding effective immediately in 2021, and it's a done deal. Well, I'm here to tell you right now, there is no done deal. We are simply in the process of gathering information. So this is the information gathering section. We are so glad that you're here because now you're a part of the process. So that's great. The strategic planning process, for those of you who don't know, is something that happens every 5 years. It's a chance for you to let us know what we're doing well and what we have to work towards doing better in the future. The Strategic Planning Committee is composed of myself and 3 other board members. Yeah, that's not working. So the Strategic Planning Committee is comprised of 4 board members, including myself, and then we have 4 administrators, and then 2 people from a company called Schoolhouse Strategies, which we hired at one of our open board meetings, at one of our public board meetings. So if you come to our board meetings, you would have seen that. And they're doing a fantastic job. We put together a survey that was on middletownak12.org that I'm sure a lot of you filled out because 2,700 people filled it out, which is amazing. The board members and I have been going through 10,000 of your written comments. Thank you so much. They're very, very helpful. And thank you to my board members who are going through these comments. I see Joan Minuy is here tonight, as well as Mike Donlin. I think I saw John Little and Deborah Wright, Robin Stella, my VP, and I know Nick DeFranco is on his way. I don't think he's here yet. So thank you to the board members for going above and beyond, because that's a lot of extra work to do. All right. So while we're upset about the rumor, obviously, we're really glad that you are here, and we appreciate the professionalism and the positivity of this board, who really are going above and beyond. I hope most of you know by now that we are to lose $6.3 million in state funding over the next 5 years. So that's the position we are in right now. We have inequity in class size throughout the districts and opportunity. So for instance, at some schools, there's not enough kids to have a certain sports team. At some schools, there are so many kids that they have a hard time getting on the sports team. So we know that we need to act, and we need to act through this strategic plan. Tonight, we will solidify our mission, values, and beliefs that we worked on in Forum 1 and Forum 2. We used information from the survey, so if you missed Forum 1 and Forum 2, not only can you catch it, middletownak12.org/strategic planning, they're all on video. We record all of our meetings, which is wonderful, and if you go to the page, you can catch up what you've missed. After we discuss the mission, values, and beliefs, we'll talk about the 3 to 5 things that have risen to the top of public interest. The process tonight might not be as specific as you would like. We need a lot more time to delve into these things, so please be patient with us. We want to get this right. We're going to have time for public comment tonight, which will also help us to go through this process. Sorry, a little cold. So, after the new year, we will invite you to a Forum 3B to finish the conversation, because we feel like tonight will not be enough time. I myself, as well as my committee, we have asked the administration and Dr. George to prepare multiple slides for this evening's presentation based on the questions that were asked and the comments from the surveys, Forum 1, Forum 2. So because we have so many people involved, I mean, look at this room, this is amazing. Thank you all for coming. So we do have a lot more input than we thought we were gonna have, which is great news. We're just gonna take a deep breath and take our time, move into the new year with Forum 3B, and we'll let you know when that's gonna be to discuss more of those topics that have bubbled to the top of public interest. People are asking me, what happens after Forum 3B? So after Forum 3B, the Strategic Planning Committee, which is those 4 board members that I mentioned before, and then the 4 administrators, and Lynn Strickland and Dave Hespy from Schoolhouse Strategies, we get together and we go through what's called a writing stage. Then once we've written the plan for you, we will present it to the public and you will be able to comment on it. You know, we're hoping at that point that we come to some sort of consensus. But if we don't come to a consensus on something, a hot topic like long-range planning, which I know a lot of you are here to discuss tonight, you know, there's always the opportunity to put this on the ballot in November in future election, 2021, 2022, for all 65,000 residents to vote on. This is all up in the air. Like I said earlier, it's not a done deal. You don't have to worry about us doing anything behind your back. We do record every single one of our meetings, and you can find them on middletownak12.org/strategic planning. I'm so glad that you're here, and I'd like to hand the meeting over for a moment to my Vice President, Robin Stella.
Yep. Hi, everyone. I'm Robin Stella, Vice President of the Board of Ed. Thank you for coming. When I was first elected to the Board of Ed, there were some enrollment challenges, but we were not yet hit with the crushing budget cuts through the S2 bill. So we were able to handle some of the enrollment challenges by, for example, hiring an extra guidance counselor or hiring extra teachers. Since then, as Mrs. Rogers told you, we are experiencing drastic cuts, while at the same time, a lot of building is happening in town. It's sort of a perfect storm. So at this point, I don't think inaction is a possibility. Just understand that any type of action that we will take will be well thought out. I too am a parent in this district. It will be well thought out, it will be compassionate, and it will be with the public's interests in mind as we're using all of the data from the survey, all 2,700 people who filled it out, plus the written comments to drive this process, as well as listening to people's comments. So just understand that, you know, we need to be patient with the process and follow it through. We don't need to rush into anything, and we want to do it right. Okay, thank you so much.
All right, at this time we'd like to turn the meeting over to Dave Hespy. He's the ex-commissioner of education. He and his partner Lynn Strickland, the former executive director of Garden State Coalition of Schools, are the people who are running this for us, and they're doing a fantastic job. So here you go, Dave.
Thank you, Pam. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our 5th public forum. So how many of you have come to forums, one of the 3 forum 1s, to get a sense of the room? Wow. Forum 2. How many came to Forum 2? Great. And who is new to our forums? Okay, so I'm going to spend a little time because we've got a fair number of new folks to the process, and that's great, by the way. I think this is the reason that Middletown is deciding to elongate this process. And I think by the time we're done, we're probably going to have twice the public input sessions than we normally have in strategic planning processes, and that's a good thing. Ultimately, the whole purpose of strategic planning is to get public input, and as Pam indicated, every district in the state does this every 5 years. You have to do it every 5 years. Middletown does not exist in a vacuum. You're responding to external issues, you're responding to internal issues. The board needs your support, your input, in order to understand what the community would like to, how a community would like to tackle a particular challenge. You certainly have challenges, those challenges change, and we're going to go through a lot of the input we received at Forum 2 as we try to focus our dialogue with you, and you're going to have a lot of chances of dialogue today. The administration is going to be doing some information sessions and engage in a dialogue with you. Dialogue means we're going to have a conversation so that you can inform yourself more. The more informed you are, the better input we get, which means the more we're going to come into alignment with what you want. But just think of strategic planning in that way. It's a highly structured process where we try to get as much input as possible. And in a community as large and as varied as Middletown, that takes time. And as Pam indicated, some 3,000 surveys, which is probably a good 10 or 20 times more than we get in a traditional strategic planning. We've had at least 100 people come to every single one of our 5 sessions so far, which is an extraordinary turnout. So this is good. We're getting all that information we want, but in order to make certain that all your voices are heard, as Pam, we have to be patient. We have to put this into context and keep moving through the process. So as Pam indicated, we are Schoolhouse Strategies. We bring experts from a number of different fields together to do strategic planning. Lynn and Stacy are my partners here. They're going to be helping me with the presentations and make certain we record your input. The minutes from each one of the forums will be up on the website. They're on the website now. Forum 2 will be on the website momentarily. So you have a tremendous wealth of data. We leave breadcrumbs throughout this process so you can see the transparency that is necessary. You want to have confidence in this process. You want to have confidence that the data is aligning with decision making. It's all there. It's all laid out on that website. All our PowerPoints are on that website for you to see. So tonight, we are engaging again with you. There's going to be, originally we were only scheduling one Forum 3, which is the culminating forum. We're now dividing that up into 2 Forum 3s, one this month and then one next month or early in February. So you have that opportunity after every forum to digest all the information, to see the minutes, and see that data. And so this is our first Forum 3, so we're getting to that end point, but we're not there yet. So tonight, welcome and introductions. I'm going to give a short overview of the process for those of you who've been to each of the forums. This will be highly redundant for you, but it's always good to get everyone on the same page from the get-go. We're then going to go into the input we received on the mission and our belief statement, and due to the good work of the people at Forum 2, we're actually adding a value statement as well to try to capture all that information we receive from you. So I think you'll be, those of you at Forum 2 will be very... Still having okay. So I think this is one of those ice cream cone mics where I've got to bring it very close and hopefully no feedback. And so I think you'll be very happy. Those of you at Forum 2, you'll see your input there solidly. Then we're going to look at the very end of Forum 2, we asked the participants to identify in each one of their, we had 12 groups, believe it or not. With 8 people in a group, you can tell a minimum of 8 people in a group. We had a tremendous number of participants in Forum 2. We asked them to identify for us the top 3 issues that we could then start focusing on what's important to you in Forums 3A and 3B, and you'll see that tonight. And then we're going to turn the presentation over to the administration, who's going to provide presentations on those 3 priority issues so you can be informed of those And then in Forum 3B, we can start refining some strategic goals that reflect each one of those priorities. And that's the evening ahead. Everyone with me so far? All right, great. So we're going to move to an overview of the strategic planning process very quickly here. Here we are. Strategic planning, and I'm going to go through these initial slides. It looks like the vast majority of you have been to at least one forum where I've done this presentation. So I'm going to move through this quickly because I want to leave the maximum amount of time possible for our administration's presentations and our dialogue with them for this meeting. But this is a change process. Again, we're trying to improve what we do through input from all of the stakeholders throughout the large Middletown community. So that's what this is. This is an informed change process that is based in what you want to accomplish. That's your mission. That's what I'm going to show you in a second. Those in Forum 2 will see that mission statement and immediately connect with their advice there. But that's where we're trying to develop a change process based and founded in those vision, mission, goals, and beliefs. Sure, where I'm pointing this. That way? There we go. I never would have thought that, by the way. But in any event, what is strategic planning? Very clearly, this helps the district make those fundamental decisions in a very disciplined, informed way. All right. No, should you short? That's the machine. Okay, maybe if I go here. Still not, there you go. So the benefits of strategic planning, it brings everyone together, it gives everyone a sense of that community, it's transparent so that you understand the challenges that the district is facing. That's an enormously important part of strategic planning. The district needs your help in tackling these very severe challenges, and this is the same issue regardless of where you go in the state of New Jersey to do strategic planning. Almost every district in the state is faced with some severe challenges. Some are enrollment driven, some are financially driven, some are facilities driven, but all of them are facing severe challenges, and strategic planning invites you into that process and gets your assistance with understanding what those challenges are, and then plotting for the next 5 years how to deal with those challenges. 3 parts of the strategic planning process. The first part we did in Forum 2, we aspired for what we want to accomplish at a very high level for our children and our families. Second step is we want to, in a very informed way, develop goals and objectives that respond to that vision and mission and values. And then the third step of the process is we're going to develop a plan, a very detailed plan with metrics and action items that accomplishes these goals and objectives, that accomplish that vision, mission, and values. And that's why it's a very structured process, because each one of these is sequential. At the end, you come up with an accountability document that is not just, this is what we hope for. It's a blueprint to get you to accomplishing those goals. And that's why it's a very structured process, because you're going to go from what you aspire to what you're going to hold yourself accountable for accomplishing. And you can't miss steps, because then accountability becomes non-existent. So step 1 of the process is to gather data. And those of you at Forum 1, we provided a tremendous amount of data for you to see about the district and the challenges of the district. That is on the website. It's 60 pages long, but we went through it in that forum, and hopefully as you see issues, you go to that PowerPoint. Step 2, community input. So if you go to Disneyland and you come to a map, it says you are here. So this is where we are. We are here in the 3rd forum. We've gathered input from you during Forum 1. We developed the vision, mission, and values in Forum 2. Now in Forum 3, we're going to develop those strategic initiatives that align with that vision, mission, and values and answer some of those challenges facing the district. Part of our input is the online survey. Lynn is going to be presenting in just a moment her thoughts on the written responses. At Forum 2, we presented to you the multiple choice responses of the survey data. There are 3,000 responses, so it is a tremendous amount of data. Tonight we'll give you the written responses to the data. And then step 3 is once we've completed the public input process, the forum processes, we'll have had 6 of them by the time we're coming to closure. We're going to bring a group together to assist us in turning those strategies and goals into metrics and timelines and resources, and that then goes through a formal approval process by the board. And very importantly, during the 5-year life of the strategic plan, we're going to develop tracking mechanisms to make certain that progress is being made, and when changes need to happen, those changes are made. Okay, we're now going to go to our second PowerPoint, Chris. Thank you. Okay, everyone at Forum 2, this is a exciting moment because you helped develop the mission. Get there. There you go. Get longer arms, and I think it'll happen. Just right. It's like Goldilocks here. I gotta get the just right button here. Right. Here's our mission statement. So those of you at Forum 2, you asked us to add language about a supportive and safe educational environment. We put that there. Helping students reach their full potential. We added that. We brought in the references to the New Jersey Learning Standards, so it's much broader now than the mission we have currently. We added language about creativity and innovation, lifelong learners, and so this is that input-driven mission statement from Forum 2. This is important. This is going to be that aspirational goal that all of our strategies are going to align with. If we come up with a strategy that we can't find in here somewhere, then the goal is not to pursue that strategy. All strategies should be aligned to our mission statement. Belief statement. Now, we had a great conversation in Forum 2 about the beliefs of the district. By the way, you'll see the district's mission and beliefs all around, hanging all around the rooms in the district. Now, that's just to remind people of what the district and community find important about education. Again, the belief statement was, we incorporated a tremendous amount of your input. Again, we have social emotional learning embedded in here. We clarified language regarding progressive resources. We added right at the top, one school district, one community. We added language balancing technology, broadening technology, and then we also added language about a safe and supportive school environment, and about partnerships, making sure that partnerships were present in the belief statement. And then we had a great conversation when we were talking about beliefs, about whether or not we wanted a separate value statement. And in fact, one of our groups, Group 10, anyone from Group 10 here? Tremendous job. We actually now came up with a separate value statement based upon a template that they presented and actually did in 20 minutes. I think Group 10, I think you had 20 minutes and came up with an exceptionally good little matrix here for us to understand what Middletown as a community values. So these are our three source documents. We'll be referring to these over and over again. They're on the website for you to see. The last thing we asked you to do at Forum 2 was to help us narrow the priorities that you're concerned with, that you believe are challenges the district needs to face, because a strategic plan can't do everything. Normally what I say to districts is, you might have maybe 6 strategic goals, maybe 7. If you do too much, you're not going to accomplish anything. So it means we need to focus on a subset of goals. Sometimes districts will choose 2. It looks like the 12 groups really gelled around these 3. Certainly there were some others, but they were less commonly cited to. The third one does include a number of different issues within it, but all tie around how do we provide the support and read support as including resources to make certain that we can put together the educational and social program we need for our students. And so these are the 3. Changing dynamics of enrollments, class sizes, and the impact on providing the best education. The facilities issue certainly was front and center as the groups looked at that issue. The second issue is what programs and services do we need to provide for students with special education needs. Inclusion was a very important part of that overall priority, and dyslexic students, who have a need for specialized programs for dyslexia, were also a part of that conversation among a number of the groups. And then the third, we have providing support for student success, facilities needs, financial needs, staffing needs, curriculum development, and additional programming needs. And where do those resources come from? So based on that input, these are our strategic areas that we're going to be working with you on. The administration will be doing a presentation next to talk more in depth about these 3 issues, to make certain that all the information that we were talking about at Forum 2 regarding why these are your priority issues will come to the surface easily for you, and then you can come to Forum 3 prepared to develop actual strategies that can address each one of these challenges. So, survey trends, I'm going to turn over to Lynn, who will give me a little break here, and she's going to go quickly through the written responses on the survey trends. Thanks, Lynn.
I'll go through. Hi.
I will just give me a high sign and I'll change.
There I am. Now can you hear me? Hello, everybody. And I will try to go through very quickly because Dave's really covered a lot of this already. I did want to quick tell you again, there was over 2,900 surveys filled out. That has never happened before in this business. It's very high. It speaks very well of your commitment to your kids. And we thank you. There is also a section on the survey, so it was multiple choice, and that's already posted on the website. But there are also written comments, written comments. There were 3,140 of them. Small print and a fair amount of words, so there was a lot to go through. Dave, I don't know if you can flick it.
There's a much better line of sight here.
There is. So I'm just going to really read through that. The changing dynamics of student enrollment and class size. We had to use some what we were keywords to see what people gathered around. So class size was up the top, 789. Smaller class size, 210. Redistrict, 196. Enrollment, 130. Lower class size, 57. Rezoning, 46. Decreasing class size, 33. Improved class size, and address class. Okay, that's 8. And addressing class size was 4. It was just overwhelming with that. And it was also in a multiple choice survey, basically, that came up. Look at it again, please.
Yep.
Thanks. So the support for student success. When you look at this really kind of goes into two things: curriculum issues, such as technology, then there's curriculum itself. I'm going to skip and go to trades, science, career readiness, language arts. Those are all curriculum issues. And then it divides also into facilities, taxes, funding, and state aid. Those are things you need to support the students. They need safe and warm and healthy buildings. They need funding for the staffing and the materials they need for learning. The environment, I suppose you could say, is either learning about the environment and/or the environment of the building. But that's why that's not a catch-all. It's two very important things, but they go hand in glove. They're together. Next one. And the special student services, also very high, but a lot of items within it, so it's spread out. But it's special education and social emotional learning. That totaled 686. From the keywords, I am sure, given that there were so many comments and so many words, there are other words that mean many of these same things that aren't showing up here, but trust me, these took a lot of study to get this to this place to be able to surface what was important to the community. Special education, 141. Inclusion, inclusive, that's another special education issue, 37. Dyslexia, 8. Improve special ed. Then there's 3 zeros. Just to show you that that was included and that just weren't the words that people put together. That's all. Special ed, yes. Mental health, 210. Bullying, 180. Intervene, 49. Drugs, 40. And social emotional was another 30. So that became number 3, student services. And it's very clearly very important to this room and everybody beyond. So that is, I think that concludes the survey information. And I think really you're in the right place with these main goals with lots of flexibility.
Yeah, that was good to see that the survey data aligned with what the 12 groups did inform too in terms of surfacing those 3 priority areas. All right, so we are going to turn over to Dr. George and his leadership team. They're going to be providing the information that has been requested at the various forums. They're going to be specifically focusing on those 3 priority areas. It is a dialogue. Please treat it as a dialogue because that's what the whole process is about. And thank you for your patience in moving through the process. I was saying to some of the board members, I really liked what you did with the mission, beliefs, and values. It's honest, it's meaningful, it gets to the core of the issues that the district is facing. So even though 12 groups was quite challenging in terms of getting all the input and bringing that sense of consensus to it, it worked. So that's the great news, and I also think that we've got a pretty good confidence level that we've triangulated these 3 priority goals through the survey multiple choice, the survey written, and the Forum 2 group work. So I think we're in a good place. So I'm going to turn this over to Dr. George.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Hespy. Welcome, everybody. I'm just, from an overview standpoint, it's really important to emphasize word inputs. You know, I think the board really, the expectation from the board is to go slow enough to really make sure that we have the opportunity to really gain community support and input, and that's really what we're trying to do. This is not a 1-year process. This is most probably a 2-year process before we get to full implementation. That's really important. So the information we as an administrative team are providing tonight is nothing more than factual information as it relates to the feedback we got from the surveys. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Gallagher, who's going to start with finance and facilities. Yes.
Good evening, evening, everyone. We have some information that we want to share with you this evening. Some of the information is information that we did include with Forum 1, but we really didn't have a chance to highlight it or give it any context. And then there is some new information as well that we would like to share with you this evening. So if you want to... The first couple of slides show information about a 5-year projection summary. Just also note this is without capital improvements. This would be strictly operating. And again, it's very high level, and it's based on how we are operating right now without any significant changes. So again, not meant to be exact, but just to give some context to what the impact of the reductions in state aid will have on our budget, and also what the impact of increasing costs and the fact that our tax levy cannot be raised at this point more than 2%, and how the deficits will continue to rise, and we will be having to take measures to close those deficits and make the budget balance. Click the next slide. So the second piece of this would be to show you hypothetically if the deficits were going to be covered by raising the tax levy would have to go up by these percentages, varying from 3.6% to 8%, just to cover those deficits. Now, there are notes on here that tax increases that are over the 2% limit are governed by statute, and there are specific requirements of those, and they must be approved and deemed as temporary or permanent. There is also discussion legislatively right now about giving districts the ability to raise the tax levy over 2% if they are losing state aid, but again, that has not really moved forward, and there's different caveats on that also. So again, this is a hypothetical just to put some perspective on the numbers at this point. These slides actually were shared with the board, I think about a little over a year ago. We did it at a board meeting, but we wanted to just also give some background on the concept of local fair share and things that go into the state aid calculations and so forth. So this slide, without going into the calculations in detail, it just pulls, we get calculations from the state with our state aid notices every year before our budget's finalized about what our level of state aid is, and then also how the state is calculating what we get for state aid and the different factors that go into it. So these numbers were pulled from our state aid notice that was issued in the spring, and it shows that what the state calculates as an adequacy budget, which is what they're saying, the district should be spending a guideline as a minimum to provide a thorough and efficient education to the, students, is almost $141 million. However, what the state is saying that Middletown has the ability to pay based upon the circumstances of the township, meaning the wealth and the property values and so forth, is $172 million. So the difference there is $31 million. So basically what that's telling you is they feel that Middletown has the ability to provide income to cover, or revenue to cover, the expenses that would be necessary for our budget. So continuing that conversation, with district local fair share being $172 million, and our current, well actually last year's tax levy, we do have, it did go up a little bit for this current year at $143 million. The difference there is $28 million. So the state looks at this as saying, well, Middletown has the ability to pay $172 million, they're paying $143 million, they're not exceeding what they can pay as a township, so there's not an issue with that. We just wanted to also review the average tax levy increases since the 2% cap on the tax levy was enacted, plus any waivers that anyone would be eligible for, was 1.81%. We also wanted to highlight that we have been actually below 2% for multiple years during that time, and we also have had years that we would have been able to use a waiver to cover additional health insurance costs and so forth, which we did not, which resulted in bank tax levy cap of $4.6 million. And what that bank cap is if you don't utilize your full authority to raise revenue, then that becomes banked for future use for 3 years, and if you don't use it, then it expires. So $4.6 million has expired that could have been added to the tax levy if the board had decided to use all of that. We'll click to the next slide. So this slide is just to provide some context to, there was a lot of discussion over the past year about increases in extraordinary aid for special education costs, and that would be a benefit to districts. And while, of course, more funding is a benefit to the district, we also wanted to show everybody what that really meant. Last year, for the year ended June 30th, 2019, we received about $1.7 million in extraordinary aid. Now, that's calculated based upon costs that we submit, eligible costs that would be eligible for this funding. We submit those, and the state takes all of the district's costs together, and they basically take those costs and they compare that to the revenue that's available to pay all the districts, and they come up with a percentage that they pay out to the districts. You don't get funded 100%. They don't have the money to fund everybody 100%. So what we received back on our costs represented 59% of the costs that we submitted, which, if you look at 2018, that was an increase of 9%, and that was nice. However, we were also at 59% back in 2015, so as you can see, the number went down, and then it went up again. So while it seems like, it is good that it went up, it really hasn't moved the needle past where we were 5 years ago. This slide just highlights some of the major capital projects that we've done over the last several years and some of the ways that we have funded those. The first one that's listed there is our ESIP, our Energy Savings Improvement Plan. We've have been doing that over the last, basically it's been 2 years. We are completed at this point. The district put in new lighting, more energy efficient lighting throughout the district. We actually did ceiling replacements in 6 elementary schools. We did continued work on the HVAC system, and we put in the solar panels. And that was all funded by the ESIP. So the concept of that is that the savings that we are generating based on these energy saving measures would pay for these improvements. We also had a referendum back in 2014 that we used to supplement ROD grants that we received. We received ROD grants for 39 projects. Everything we submitted that year was approved. So we received 12 million in ROD grants to put toward 31 million in improvements. So that was a very good deal for the district. So the voters approved that referendum, and we did a lot of work to the schools then too. We also have put new roofs on all the buildings between 2012 and 16. We've done a new camera system, track replacement, turf field replacement, elevator replacements, lighting and sound systems. These are some of the major things that we've done, but a lot of it's been funded with these outside of the operating budget mechanisms. So we're not going to go over this in detail, but this is just to, for reference, information about the school buildings. We have the elementary, and we also have the other buildings as well, but it just gives you an idea of what year they were built. Now, the year they were built is one thing. There have been some improvements to some of the buildings since that time, but these were the original dates that they were built. The square footage of the buildings, the capacities, the current enrollments, and the over and under. I just want to make a couple of comments about the capacities. So capacities are based upon calculations that are done with our long-range facility plan. We are in the process of updating our long-range facility plan. The last time it was done was, well, it was approved back in like 2009. So it's been, it's been a while. The state hasn't really been accepting them, but now they are. So we are in the process of doing a full update. And it's calculated using things like square footage, district practice, number of classrooms, and how much capacity they generate. So there's factors that go into it. So we're in the process of recalculating all of these capacities. We don't expect them to change significantly, but they could change a little bit. And what these capacities are meant for in the long-range facilities plan is really to just give the state an idea of whether you, if you're proposing a construction project, do you really need that space? And they look at it by grade level. So what they would say, if you were proposing, say, in addition to a high school, they would say, well, do you have enough space in the high schools that you have, grades 9 through 12? Do you need that space? They want to determine the necessity of doing those projects. And conversely, if these numbers were greatly skewed, that you did not show that you had enough capacity for your students, then the state would be saying to you, well, you need to make plans to accommodate the students. So that's really all that is meant for. But we use it, just to show you some perspective on the buildings. So again, this is all up on the website, and you can refer to it. The other thing we did, and this was in response to some of the discussion in the previous forum, was to take some high-level elementary school cost allocations, just to give some idea of some of the specific costs that go into running buildings. The salaries that are presented up here, principal, teachers, counselors, so forth, they're all average salaries. They're not specific to that building, so but they're an average across the district. But it just gives you an idea of what goes into running a building personnel-wise. And then if you go to the next slide, some of the other specific costs that go to running the building: utilities, insurance, repairs and maintenance. It does not include capital improvements that these buildings may need. And like I said before, we're in the process of updating our long-range facilities plan so that we could come up with updated numbers for what these buildings may need as far as large maintenance items and also educational improvements. But based upon the old budget that we did, if you want to go back to the slide we were just on. That's okay. Okay. Those were amounts that were included in the old plan. Now, we've done some of those, and we have some new ones, so we'll have updated numbers on that in the next few months. They're all the right. It's for the time, so you can just go through those. Again, these are all up on the website. And these are some of the notes. We did not allocate transportation costs. We can't allocate those. They're really tied to the students and not to the buildings, so that is not included in those allocations. So the last few slides that I'm going to talk about are transportation slides. We just thought it would be a useful metric to look at by school, the percentage of students that attend the school that are currently transported. And it actually showed us some interesting information. The percentages range from Lincroft being 100% because of the location of the school, down to there's some schools where I think like Harmony and Harmony's at 13%. Ocean Avenue, I think that's on the next slide, that's low. And some of them, very few students are transported. But on average, if you take all of the schools, we transport a little over half of the students currently to all of the schools that the students attend. So it's, we just thought that was interesting. We knew what the numbers were, but we haven't really looked at it school by school before, and it did show some differences there. I think those are all the slides that I have. So I'm going to pass that over to Mrs. Walker to talk about enrollment trends.
Thank you. As Mrs. Gallagher said, the next few slides represent some data on district enrollment trends. We've been talking about the declining enrollment in the district at the last forums and even beyond that over the last year at our budget meetings and some board meetings. This slide represents the enrollments at each level, elementary, middle, and high, from 2009-10 through this year. We took the October 15th snapshot date. That's a report that we sent to the state. So these all represent every year what the enrollment was on October 15th. And what you will see is if you look at the district total on the end, there's a steady decline with the exception of the years 14, 15, and 15, 16 where we were stagnant, but there's been a steady decline in enrollment throughout these years, and it represents 8% decrease over the time period. So that's pretty significant. If you go to the next few slides, the next 3 slides are specific elementary school enrollments, and they're grouped by their unit that they go to, the middle schools, all right? So it's kind of easier to look because we are kind of looking at the shifting of population, so it gives us a better picture if we group them that way. But you will see as you go through all these 3 slides that there is a decline overall, maybe not in every school, but in 10 of the 12 schools, you will see a decline over the time period. And in each sending unit, you will see a significant decline. If you go to the next slide, keep going. There you go. These are the secondary enrollment trends. And this also shows a decline, but you're going to see now where the shifting student populations are coming in. You see that there's a decline at Bayshore, Thorne, and North, where you have an increase of students at Thompson and South over that time period. But if you remember that first slide, we do have an 8% decrease overall in the district. Next, we're going to have Ms. Pickus. She's going to talk to us about student assessments.
Switch devices.
Good evening, everyone. As Assistant Superintendent, the 2 departments that I oversee and supervise are curriculum and instruction and human resources. So 2 big drivers of your annual budget. Personnel, which consumes a lot of the cost and a lot of the monies, the funding of the overall budget, as well as curriculum, which is your academic programs, which ties directly to the staff who implement them. So every year, annually, we are required by law to report out in September and October on student success when it comes to the state standardized assessments. State standardized assessments are one measure that we as a district look at, and it's one piece of data that we reflect on when we're evaluating overall performance of students as it relates to their mastery towards grade level standards or course content standards as it would relate to high school. This slide, I'm going to provide some context to it for you because it's a lot of numbers. And as Ms. Gallagher and Mrs. Walker have said, all of these slides are available on the district website. So I'm certainly not going to go through every number up here in every column, but I want to provide context so that when you go home and you revisit these slides, you have a better understanding of how we look at this and how this data is compiled. So we typically, when we present the information in September and October, the only information that we have at that point from the state is what we would generally, in layman's term, like you and I would say, passing rates. What the state refers to it as the percent of students who are meeting or exceeding expectations on state standards for that grade level or for that course. So that is what you're basically looking at in the first column, which headline is in pink. So that's just the overall passing rate or percent of students meeting or exceeding expectations on the state standardized assessment. Now, over the last 6 or 7 years, it's been difficult, quite honestly, to monitor and make decisions and evaluate student performance because we've gone through 3 different changes in state assessments. If you remember, those of you who have had children long enough in schools, probably about 6 or 7 years ago, for quite a while, we were administering the New Jersey Ask. And at the secondary level, it was the HESPA or the HSPT. Then we moved to the PARC, and that was implemented for a few years. And we were getting state results and state assessment, student assessment results based on the PARC performance. For the last 2 years, this last spring, was the second year that we administered, again, a 3rd iteration of the state assessment, the New Jersey Student Learning Assessment, which is rooted in now the New Jersey Student Learning Standards, which by law, because we are a public school district, we are required to teach and to hold students measurably accountable to in terms of making progress, those state standards. So because the tests have changed, it kind of makes it a little bit difficult to monitor student performance from year to year as individuals. But what we can do as a district is take faith and stock in these numbers. When we look at it from an administrative and from the teacher side, how well is our curriculum supporting our students in their growth towards those standards? So how is it supporting them? The resources that we adopt, the curriculum that we adopt and we draft based on the state standards, And how are we at assigning personnel, especially key personnel, like specialists, reading specialists, math specialists, special education teachers, in supporting students who have different needs in meeting those standards. Because when we talk about equity and providing equity to education, it really means providing equal access, removing barriers that individuals have, because everybody's needs and everybody's learning capacity is different. So how do we manage the resources and the personnel to create an equitable learning environment? Meaning giving every kid what they need to be successful. So the first column again is just pure percentage of students, and this is the elementary ELA. And there's subsequent slides that will dive into math and that will dive into middle school and then high school. And it's each by ELA and each math. We have at times the principals, usually sometime in January more recently. It's kind of the time frame has shifted on us because the state embargoes certain information for a period of time and doesn't allow us to make it public until they've vetted it out. So typically now, in more recent years, the principals will do a deeper dive into school-specific data by sometime in January or February, or whenever the further data is released. The reason why this chart stops at the 17-18 school year is because this type of data for this past spring hasn't been released yet. It's still embargoed. We're hopeful that by the new year, when we have our next forum, that information will be released and the embargo will be lifted, and then we can update you to current, to real time. So those percentages there. So the color coding in the in this set of columns, the pink column, as we'll call it, is correlated to the next set of columns, and that's the purple. And that's an annual percentage target that the state has assigned to every school under the new ESSA guidelines. So because the state accepts federal monies, and because we accept state money, therefore federal monies, we are all bound to meeting certain degrees of proficiency amongst all our students, moving students towards mastery. So part of those requirements the state has set forth on us is meeting 80% in every school. They want to see that by the year 2030, 80% of the population is meeting or exceeding expectations in that content area. So what they did is they did a snapshot in the year 15-16 for every school. In the year 15-16, what percent of students who were tested, who were administered a state assessment, met or exceeded standards, expectations? And from that year, from that snapshot year, they created individual yearly targets of incremental growth that schools are expected to reach to move them to 80% by 2030. So what you'll see is that some of the schools, and I'll just use Middletown Village right here, in 2 years ago, in 17-18, and again, as soon as we get the 18-19 data, I'll be able, in the next slide, I can show you this piece. But in 17-18, 76.9% of their grade 3 to 5 students who took a state assessment met or exceeded the standards. That correlates to the Y here, meaning that they met whatever their target was for that year, towards 80%. Now, when we look at data, we ask a lot of questions, because that's what data really suggests that you do. Not make necessarily assumptions, but ask questions. So we ask the question, well, that's good, they're making incremental growth. They're very close to their 80% final target. So curriculum, services, staffing must be apportionately working well for that school. Okay, so those are, and then what are they doing there? You know, that's what we do. We ask questions. Why is that successful? Some other things people sometimes notice when they look at these types of charts is the green means they met their target for that year. The orange means the state says they met the target, but within the confidence interval. So the state applies a confidence interval, and for those of you who love probability and statistics, you can certainly give a better lesson than I, on the fact that it allows for wiggle room, in layman's term, okay? It's a percent that you're very close to whatever that target is, and there may be undetermined variables that could influence and that they can't account for. You know, that they'll kind of give you like an allowance. You're pretty much there, in other words. So that's the orange. The red means they did not meet their target for that year. And some people will then question, like, wow, well, at River Plaza, 73.3% of their students in 17-18 met or exceeded expectations. And that seems really good compared to, I'll just say, Bayview perhaps. Why would that be red? Well, River Plaza's individual school target for that year, based on the students' performance in 15-16, students who are no longer even in that school, was such and expected that it was greater than the 73.3. Okay? So there's room for improvement there. That's what we would stop and ask questions about. Now, the third area that we look at data, because there's multiple measures in determining school success and how well the curriculum is working for the students in that school, is what kind of growth they're making, those students, compared to their like peers. And the state defines their like peers as those students who received the same score on the state assessment the previous year than they did. So if I got a 200 the year before, they're comparing me to other students around the state who got the same score of 200. And in that next year, how did I fare? What was my score compared to them? Because the previous year we seemed to be performing at the same level in our understanding of standards. Now, take it, from year to year the standards change. So what I'm expected to know and show mastery in third grade is different from what I'm expected to know and show mastery in fourth grade. So that's one variable right there. There's a lot of variables that are introduced in this. This isn't a perfect science. And things can happen to children from year to year, things that can impact their performance. And again, this is a state assessment that's administered over about a 6 to 8 day period. So it's not what they do on a daily basis or throughout the year. So sometimes that can influence scores. It's a bad day, I don't feel well that week, so I'm not at my best. So that's why this is just one piece of data that we review. But what they're looking for here is, did the students in that school make adequate progress compared to their like peers, those who scored similar to them the year before? Now, where it's Y, that means you fell within dead center. Like you're moving just like typical of all students. Where you see an N, that means you didn't perform perhaps as well as a collective whole in that school compared to students of likeness. So that's another area. So sometimes you can, when you look at data, you're looking at just the raw number of kids who are meeting or exceeding expectations. Are they making progress towards the school's goal, target goal, that the state has set on the school, not individual students? And are the students making gains compared to other students who performed like them in the previous year? So that's 3 different ways you can kind of analyze and look at the state standardized assessment data to really critically think about how our programs, our curriculum, our instructional delivery, and our use of staff resources is best servicing our students. If you go to the next slide. So this is the information from this past spring that is not embargoed. And this is just pretty much how many students met or exceeded the standards. You notice that's only one piece of the 3 pieces of data that we just looked at in the previous slide. So what we created for you was just comparisons to the district-wide, how many students. So district-wide, at the elementary level in grades 3 to 5, we had 65% of students meet or exceed expectations. Across the state, 55% of students met or exceeded expectations for their grade level standards, their individual grade level standards at the elementary level, so it would be grades 3 to 5. I also just want to point out that sometimes people look at these numbers and they ask me, that seems really low, shouldn't we be doing better? Keep in mind, New Jersey is the #1 performing state in the country. We usually are somewhere around number 2. Massachusetts usually tops us. This year we topped them. So our students statewide are performing very well. We have some of the highest expectations and some of the most rigorous standards compared to other states in the union. In fact, on the assessment that we administer, which is contracted with Pearson, our students, in order to be considered meeting our expectations or mastering their content, have to earn a score of 4 or 5. In most states that utilize Pearson assessments, they consider a 3 passing or meeting expectations. So we have a higher threshold for capturing students and considering students as meeting or exceeding expectations than most states in the country. And yet we still have really good passing rates, because statistically this would be considered very good, especially at the elementary level and really K to 12, because learning is a continuum. There's a developmental period of time just like not every one of your children, if you have more than one child, if you have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, God bless you, if not every one of them walked on the same exact day, you know, at the same exact age, you know? So it's the same thing with learning. They're not all gonna get there at the same exact point in time. So there is a developmental period in which we monitor and they account for students mastering their content. So the next will be math, and it's the same as the first slide that we went over. So when you go home, drinking your cup of tea one night in front of the fire, and you want some real leisure reading, and you pull this out, you can digest it, and now you kind of have a frame, a sense of how to look at it. And then it's the same, this is the snapshot from this past spring. It's the only data that has been released as it's that passing rate, or that meeting or exceeding expectations for math. And then we move into secondary, and you'll see the same type of slides repeated with the same information. With the same information. You hit a good spot, whatever that was. So it's the same concept repeated by different grade levels. So the questions we typically will ask of that kind of data is, do we need to shift our resources in terms of personnel to better meet the needs of students in different schools if they have larger growth increments to make towards their targets? Right now, you know, we pretty much, when we adopt a curriculum and resources to support teaching and learning, it's pretty uniform. We're consistent in the district. You know, things we ask are, should we be changing the types of resources or the curriculum that students are utilizing and teachers are utilizing? Because maybe the needs in schools are different, you know, based on where the students are coming in. And we do that. You know, the federal government and the state do give us Title I funds. And those Title I funds are utilized to provide services and resources to Title I designated students. And those are students who are economically disadvantaged, and what we do with those monies has to be above and beyond what we give to any other student in the district. So hence why in our Title I elementary schools, they are staffed with more reading development teachers and math specialists to provide interventions. Because theoretically, there's more students who are eligible who are needing of that support. Okay, I think Dr. Tiedemann, I'm gonna move on. So the other department that we work very closely with is that of student services, special education. A lot of our staff who is encumbered and encompasses the almost 1,500 employees of our district do work within both our general education and our special education environments, and they implement both general education resources and curriculum and other resources that special education provides.
I need a little tutorial with the clicker. I'll do for you.
Okay.
You're good. All right, thank you. So thanks for coming out tonight. Also, thank you for your input on the survey. Anything you can tell us about how we can improve our student services, our special education, we definitely want to hear from you. So the Office of Student Services, Special Education encompasses many areas to assist our students. Our self-study team, IEPs, related services, all of our special education programs, social emotional learning, we have our preschool, child find, 504 accommodation plans, home instruction, safety screenings, and we have a very large special education teaching and support staff. So within our special education programs, one of the baselines of special education is offering a continuum of support services. Our students have a variety of needs. We want to make sure we're individualizing their programs. So at the top of least restrictive environment is general education. Most time spent in general education is always the goal for students as we work towards that. We have in-class resource, we have resource replacement programs, we have many special class programs for students with autism, students with behavioral disabilities, students who have learning or language disabilities, students with multiple disabilities, and next to those in the parentheses you see the minimum amount that we strive to include our students with disabilities with their non-disabled peers, and that is the minimum. again, it's always individualized and discussed at IEP meetings. We have some students in out-of-district placements, and we have some students on home instruction, which is a very restricted placement. Customized program along the continuum of placements. Many students have hybrid programs, so they may be in a self-contained pull-out resource setting for one subject, in-class support for another. They may be in general ed with only supplementary aids and supports for another. And that's due to the individualization of the programs. So, though I wasn't here, many supports were added over the last 5 years. Expansion of resource programs, both in-class and out-of-class programs. Many enhancements in social-emotional supports for students. There are therapeutic programs at both high schools and also a self-contained therapeutic program that's housed at High School North. There have behavioral disabilities program added at the elementary level within the last 5 years. And LLD, your Learning and Language Disabilities program, housed at High School North. An MD program, your Multiply Disabled program at High School South. And when we get to the slide with the staff, you'll see there's reading development teachers and math specialists that have been added within the last 5 years. So the special education and support staff, you see the numbers from, we looked at 2009 to 2010 school year, 2014-2015, and current 2019-2020. And you see between June 2010, hard to believe, almost 10 years ago, and currently there's been a 48% increase in the number of special education teachers and RTI interventionists, 17% increase in the number of special service providers and support specialists, and 81% of our special ed teachers and RTI interventionists deliver instruction in either an inclusive setting or as a hybrid model, meaning they may teach one period of pull-out resource, they may teach one or more periods of in-class resource, they may even teach a self-contained class, perhaps just one because they are departmentalized at the upper level. So currently, this is the number of staff members that are part of the support services staff. And as you can see, there are every area of expertise that are provided to the students within the district. Just take a second to take a look at that. All the way from teachers through individual nursing. Oh, I'm sorry, okay. Usually people can hear me quite well without it, but I'll speak right into it. Okay, so this is by discipline, the number of current staff members and contracted providers that we have within the special education department. So special education classification data, give you a second to just begin to digest that. When we look right across the bottom, we're looking at increase in special education classification data. The only place we have a decrease was in students who are speech only. So there are speech only IEPs, typically referred to as ESLS IEPs. We see increases in our special education population, otherwise across the board. I'm just going to give you a second to take a look at that. We summarize it on the next slide. Overall, 2009-2010 versus our current school year. Here are our classification rates. And you see overall from 2009 to 2010 to currently, we went from 16.4% to 20.1%. And there are many reasons why, whether it be the rise in autism that is acknowledged throughout the country, whether it be better diagnostic tools for targeting our students' needs and whether or not there are disabilities. So we have many inclusion programs. Here are a few. We have Challenger, Phys Ed, and elective courses. We have reverse mainstreaming. So in reverse mainstreaming, you may have a self-contained class in which peers without disabilities come in to spend time and do activities with our students with disabilities. Fostering friendships, formerly known as Circle of Friends. Friendship clubs, Slam Dunk for Autism, which actually will take place in January, and flyer will go out soon. And Unified Sports is a grant program in which our students with disabilities will have expanded opportunities for extracurricular sports. Technology is always part of our education and expanded for our students with disabilities who have the benefit of smart boards, Chromebooks, assistive technologies. Some students have one-to-one devices. AT consultations, assistive technology, evaluations, and consideration are part of our diagnostic tools, reading and writing for Google. And then we have a wealth of computer software programs, some of them listed up there. So significant changes and enhancement to the programs are reduction in students attending out of district placement. While we are showing a high classification rate, we have a very low rate of students who we are not ever able to educate within district because of all the programs that Middletown offers. We also have students from other townships that come in and they pay Middletown tuition, and we do often get requests from other districts who have heard about our programs. They send us records and we see whether or not it's a good fit. They pay tuition to come into Middletown. And an increased number of special education students participating in grade level state assessments. So for those of you who may be familiar with the old APA binders, which have been replaced by dynamic learning maps, it takes the place of the former PARC, now NJSLA, for our students with the most significant disabilities. Increased collaboration within the last 5 years, and we are always working to expand this particular area where we're collaborating with our general education colleagues. So increased articulation among the child study team, the guidance staff, the teachers to improve transition for students, elementary to middle to high school, not an easy transition for any of our students. We want to offer them as much support as we can. So there are program visits, we have child study teams and teachers visiting the different programs. Content area meetings are ongoing with special education and general education teachers. Curriculum development writing, make sure we include gen ed and special ed staff members. Special class program articulation meetings amongst those who teach our special class programs. Elementary articulation with our SBSSs who replace our guidance counselors as student support behavior specialists in CST, and also between guidance and CST at our secondary, meaning our middle and high school levels. So social emotional learning is becoming an area that we are definitely expanding on as research shows us a greater and greater need for our students. So there are many SEL lessons included in the health curriculum. I'll let you take a look at the high school. Self-care, self-management as they prepare to move on to adulthood. Middle school, responsible decision-making for our younger adolescents. Elementary, self-care, positive relationship. They're really moving into their own management of their decision-making. Responsive classroom approach has been expanded to all elementary schools and is currently being piloted at Bayshore Middle School. Peer leadership, so the Bottle Cappers is a club specific to Middletown in which high school students meet with younger students and talk to them about the importance of avoiding all substance use and also vaping, which is, as you know, as parents, becoming a problem. So we have the Bottle Cappers Heroes, and Cool Kids is actually an outside organization in which some Middletown students are trained as mentors so they can help younger students be good decision makers. Project Insight, CPC Bite Early Intervention Program. We still need high school, but we mean early intervening. We want to catch our students as early as we possibly can if they are at risk for developing substance abuse problem. Project Plus and Reaching Out event is Municipal Alliance to help our students with good decision making. I think down below it's hashtag Not Even Once, which is teaching our high school students about the importance of avoiding opioid use even one time. And what was the next one? Was it LEAD maybe? I think it was LEAD for our elementary students, our 5th grade students, on good decision making and avoiding substance use. So personnel supports for student social emotional well-being. We have many staff members who are devoted to our students' social and emotional well-being. We have our SBSSs who function as our school counselors at the elementary level, 3 counselors at Thorne and Bayshore, 4 at Thompson, 6.5 counselors at each high school. We have a total of 13 high school counselors. We have SACs, student assistance counselors at high school and middle school. We have school psychologists and school social workers, 19 nurses. CPC provides counseling. They come into our high school and middle school. ESS is our therapeutic wraparound and self-contained program at the high school level. And this year the YMCA counseling has expanded to all 17 schools. We do have 1 or 2 that this week are wrapping up their site license, but by the time we return from break, that should be up and running in all 17 schools. Mental Health Board was established, and it is inclusive of counselors, school psychologists, school social workers, CST case managers, because many of the LDTCs who don't have a mental health background attend meetings of the Mental Health Board. The Mental Health Board, they monitor our students' social emotional learning programs, psychological first aid, the Lifelines curriculum, suicide prevention, which is part of our health curriculum, and make sure that we're a trauma-informed school district so that if there is some kind of trauma, our mental health board professionals are able to come in and support the staff and the students. Teacher professional development is always ongoing, special education and general education. So they are trained together. They write collaborative IEPs. General education and special education teachers attend the IEP meetings, talk about students' goals and objectives. We have many multi-sensory reading programs. There are a few. Fontes and Pinnell, Reading and Writing Workshop. We have the Teachers College Reading and Writing Project. Some of our teachers go out and attend PD at Teachers College in New York, and also during the summer, there's an in-house program. And then the Autism Program Improvement Plan runs out of Monmouth University, in which they come in and help support the teachers of our students with autism. Child Study Team and related services, they also participate in ongoing PD on many of the disabilities and deficits that some of our children have to attend with. We keep them updated on new research in art therapy, dyslexia. We have legal updates from our attorneys, behavior, mindfulness, transition planning, LGBT issues, school-based interventions, the suicide prevention curriculum they're well versed on, behavioral assessments, educational assessments, and school refusal. We also continue our paraprofessional PD to ensure that our paraprofessionals are contemporary in their knowledge of how best to support our students. We're part of Rutgers Paraprofessional Coaching this year. There's also, they do arts instruction, they're coached in related services, fostering students' independence, CPR, use of technology, and all of the other programs that support our students. I think that's my last one.
May I ask a question?
Yeah, we're going to get right into question and answer right now, so you will get the first one. So very good. That was very strategic of you in our strategic planning process. All right, so this is all the information we owed you from the forums. I think you now have everything you need for Forum 3B, where we're going to start developing those individual strategies, and we wanted to leave a lot of time tonight for you to engage directly with Dr. George and his leadership team on all of these issues that you see here. So I'm going to be in the audience with the microphone. I know where I'm going first here. I'm going to turn this other microphone over to Dr. George and his team. All right, you ready? All right, so think through your questions so we can be very explicit. We're going to have a lot of questions here, so think them through. You don't have time to think it through, so you are under the pressure here.
Yeah, hi. So sorry for the interruption. I was looking forward to this being a community forum where you could hear from the community. And this was lovely information, but I think in some ways you're preaching to the converted. We agree that the schools are great, which is why we're so invested in making sure they stay great. And in some ways I feel like PowerPoints are things we could read. I think a lot of folks came here so we could give our opinions and talk through versus just kind of listening. So with that being said, I'm trying to get up my notes here, although now I'm a little on the spot for interrupting, so so I guess I just wanted to talk a little. I appreciated you starting off with saying that this quote-unquote rumor about school banding, I'm one of the folks that heard it. I'm one of the folks that was following it on Facebook, right? But at the end of the day, right, so I'm a transplant. I just moved here. I just moved here from Hazlitt. And I moved here for the schools. And I moved here because I didn't like the school banding on the other side, right? And so coming here and hearing now that that's on the table and hearing the chatter that, not next school year, the school year after that, it's happening, high school, 9 and 10 in one school, 11 and 12 in another, it's really upsetting. I don't think school banding's a great idea. I think that I understand that there's a tight budget and I understand there's a lot to be done, but I feel like we need to really get the opinions of the folks in the room. I think the schools here are great. I think there's a great formula. So, do I think there's room for improvement? Sure. But do I think we should throw the baby out with the bathwater and retake the whole thing and throw it up in the air and redo it? I don't. Right? I have a kid in Lincroft and I have a kid in Thompson. They both love it. We've been here 2 years. We're very happy in this town. I've got a middle schooler who raves about middle school. When does that happen at that age, right? It just doesn't. It's unique, and so I'd like to keep that formula. And so I'm concerned. When I hear about the banding, I'm concerned about my property values, I'm concerned about the quality of the schools, I'm concerned about all that.
I have two questions. One is more general because I've been to all of the forums, this being my third, and so we were assured through the first two that the third was like getting into the meat of it, be patient, and that's where we're gonna go. So I understand that you split it up now, but I wanna know, is the intent of Forum 3B then to do what we were told this forum was going to be doing, which is to develop the actionable plan that is then gonna be based on community input and what we feel would be, a driving force to the district to be considered by the administration. Because also in Forum 2, at the end, it was sort of stated that those 8 people representing the board at the close of that forum will be taking whatever those actionable items are and be doing the vote on it. And they were asked if they would consider expressing why they made the choices they made. But what I was hearing Ms. Rogers say earlier today is that now they're more open to having public input at every step of the process, and if there's not a consensus with the community, even going to a ballot, but not just those 8 people making a vote. And that is very different from what was stated at the end of Forum 2. So I'd like a clear understanding on where we're going. So that's my first question, is 3B, and,
You want me to explain? When I speak just for myself. I can't speak for the whole board, there's 9 of us. So I was just giving my perspective as a board member, as one of 9. That's something that I would propose. If we couldn't come to a consensus as a community with all of us, at the end of it, I would move that we put 2 different solutions on a ballot and vote for it. But I haven't asked my board members what they think, so I can't speak for the entire board. That's what I'm saying.
So where it sits right now, at the close of Forum 3B, with the community input and the actionable items, right now, it then goes into the hands of those 8 people to make a decision and vote?
We don't know. We don't know yet what's going to happen. Do you see what I'm saying?
because we haven't discussed
Well,
it.
it's pretty ambiguous, like what is the process? That's what we're trying to understand.
Normally the process would be for us to vote, for the 9 of us to vote at a public board meeting, once we've presented it to the public at a hearing, right, with all of your input from the hearing, we'd let you public comment, and then you could email us all of your input, and then we'd vote on it, the 9 of us, right, to approve something that's recommended by the superintendent. But what I'm saying is if we can't get there, because this is such a hot topic, we should be looking at alternatives as well to that.
If I could add to that too, it was never stated at the end of Forum 3, whether it was an A or B, that it would be over. It would go back to the public board meetings and the public forums through the board meetings, and we would continue to update the public. So I think what we're saying here is we're at a place where we want to hear from everybody here.
Right.
And we have 35 minutes to do it. And we heard from you and we
I
appreciate that.
appreciate that, but I also feel that saying that you still want to hear from the public and that it will still be presented to the public is very different from their concerns being able to be considered at that stage when you're about to make a vote. So we're trying to understand, have a clear expectation of, you know, everybody has opinions on this topic, okay? So putting all of that aside, understanding where our input is ending and you guys are taking over to come to a final conclusion on what happens for the district, or is there no end to that? And I think that's what's ambiguous right now. That's just where I am. So stated, you know, I'd appreciate clarification. I want to make my other point and then I'll pass along.
You just want to keep it moving.
Yes. My other point is I also am very much against school banding. And I'm also against you disrupting a 9 through 12 structure of the high schools. And there is a huge legacy in this district. In South and North. In fact, I moved back here from a district that had banding. I was not happy with it. I'm a graduate of Thompson, a graduate of South. I moved back here to put my kids through this district. And I think that there's a lot of things that need to be considered before these types of things are being discussed. And I feel like it should be discussed always with the public in view and not just in teacher meetings when things are trickling out through the community in you know, secondhand to the community, but firsthand directly between some of the staff. I would appreciate that.
All right, make sure you raise your hands and we're going to try to move around to everyone. Just again, think through your questions so we can get to as many people as possible this evening. I'll hold the mic for you so we can move it quickly.
I just want to know why everyone was so grateful that we did the survey. So many people answered the survey. So grateful. Thank you so much for answering the survey. Meanwhile, we did not address the number one thing that people were talking about in the survey. And you actually worded it in different ways that everyone's concerned about, class size, and then you worded it differently.
That was number one, right? That
It was
the
number
first
one,
issue, right?
but then it was also improved class size, decreased class size, lower, like you just broke it up into, but in an hour and a half now, we have less than 20 minutes or so, not been addressed. Meanwhile, everything that you guys said, I looked at a PowerPoint before I came here, and I went from work, left my kids with a babysitter, to have all these people. So you guys have to answer that.
The class size and the school facilities issue, that's clearly in priority number one.
But we didn't talk about it. So
Yeah,
we
but-
didn't talk about it.
Yeah, which is fine to interrupt, that's fine, I get interrupted all the time. But what we're trying to accomplish, don't forget, is you ask for information. It's what I hear when I do strategic planning is don't make us make decisions before you've given us all the information we need. And that's what we're trying to accomplish now, is you ask for a lot of information. We're trying to provide that to you and then give you an opportunity to follow up on that information so that when we get to Form 3B, we're ready to go. We're going to be developing those strategic goals that align with that first issue of class sizes, school space utilization. That's all embedded in that first area. And I think oftentimes we have problems in terms of taking that understanding from one forum to the other forum. But that was really part of Forum 2, is to develop not only those strategic priorities, which that was number one. Clearly that was the number one issue. That's embedded in that item number one. The group spoke about it in various ways, but that clearly is item number one. And so that's what we're trying to accomplish tonight, is answer all those questions regarding information so that we don't hear at Forum 3B that you don't have enough information to get to closure here. So I'm going to come over there.
Those solutions are addressed by the district though. It was addressed by you, but we still haven't heard a solution addressed by the district. We still haven't heard options for solutions that are going to be addressed by the district.
Okay, and I think we should be getting into that meet in Forum 3B, so that's the part of the information that needs to happen here. So go one step at a time. Here, and then I'll come on back.
Hi, I appreciate that you want to take your time and go through the process and make sure we make research-based decisions, data-based decisions, but my concern is about class size for the immediate future. My son is in Lincroft and was one of the classes that went from 19 to 27, and I'm going to tell you it's a totally different experience this year and not one that I'm happy with. I think the teachers are wonderful, but you're asking them to work under conditions, and as an educator I can say this very truthfully, you're asking them to work under conditions that are not going to succeed. And I want to know that class size isn't 3 years down the road, because I'm going to open houses for private schools next month, and I don't want to do that. But I don't want to continue, so I don't want to know that class size changing is 3 years down the road when there's specialists floating around the building. And I'm sorry, I've been in education 26 years. I respect the specialists, they're highly trained, but that is a waste of a resource when you can have another highly qualified in a class with 20 kids affecting their education every day, rather than floating around doing special lessons and giving some PD. That's not a good use of those funds, which can be an immediate short-term solution for class size. And I want to know that that can happen soon, the class size, not 3 years down the road. If you can tell me it's not going to happen, then I'll proceed trying to play the lottery to figure out how I'm going to pay for private school. So I don't know. I would love to hear if that class size is immediate.
Great, thank you.
Is there any answers?
The team is going to take this in. I think when there's a question, they will answer or come back to
I was careful to word that as a
Class
question.
size going to be addressed, yes or no?
Yeah, that's a question.
And when?
And we're going to come around this way.
What's the biggest size district that you've done this in?
Give her the mic. No, we
Sorry, can you hear me? So,
She asked if we're experts on grade band. She wants to know what's the largest district we've worked with. And in fact, Middletown is the largest district we've worked with. By the way, Middletown is one of our, if you look at the 10 largest districts in the state, you'll probably see Middletown being in the top 10. So outside the urban districts who do strategic planning a little differently. So that's number one. You are unusual because you are extraordinarily large, and we have to adapt the process to account for that. Now, in terms of grade banding, this is a conversation that has to happen in every community. It's not unique to Middletown, certainly, and you should have that conversation.
But Middletown is unique because of the school district size.
Because of the school, correct, yeah, there's not outside the urban districts, there's not many districts larger than Middletown, outside the large urban districts in New Jersey that do strategic planning differently. All right, I'm gonna come back, gonna keep heading this way.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for all this information. I participated in Forum 1 and 2, so I'm a little disappointed with the mission and the values, specifically because there's been a lot of input from the special education community. And one of the questions that was asked at Forum 2 was if inclusion or the inclusive community was a value to us. And I thought that the majority of the groups said that it was.
Yes, it
was. It's really surprising not to even see the word in the mission statement or the values or the beliefs. We see the word equity, but it's not the same as inclusion. And we brought in an inclusion expert, being friends with different learners, and we filled up this room. There's been a lot of excitement about it. And I thought that we were going to see some inclusion data and some solutions, and an explanation as to how we got here, because as a district, we were at like 69% inclusion 10 years ago, and now we're at 50%. So we're going in the wrong direction. So when people think of the lack of equity socioeconomically here, there's a lack of equity with kids that are getting a completely different kind of education because they can't even have access to a general education classroom. And that's an issue that right now in strategic planning, we need to figure out. Are we going to have different kinds of scheduling? Are we going to have the intervention period? This is the time to figure that out. And it's just very disappointing to see the whole issue completely sidelined and not been addressed. So I'm just saying I'm very disappointed in that.
It is our strategic goal, which is looking at special education and inclusion. The belief statement focused on, try to use different language to describe that. So I would ask you to take another look at that, and if you really don't think that the equitable language works, then let us know and we'll take another look at it with our special service director.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work.
I just have a few things I want to address, but as far as what was just said over there about inclusion, I do think that goes hand in hand with smaller class sizes. You're increasing the 4th grade maximum to 27 children in a class. How are those inclusion students going to succeed? So, I really do think that I wish that would have been addressed more, what's going to happen for next year, because I have a 3rd grader going to be a 4th grader. Because I really think that is a big problem. I don't know why, last year, the first year that we really saw that maximum, or this year rather, go to 27. And I don't understand why we think as a district we can do, that we're going towards those missions, towards those values, keeping that 27 4th and 5th grade maximum. That doesn't make sense to me. The other thing I just want to bring up with the grade banding, I know there was a lot of talk on social media. Do we have a confirmation that is one of the options, or do we not have a confirmation at this time that that's even being considered? 1. 2, I'm curious if the board or administration did receive the petition that went around social media, that 1,200 parent signs against the grade banding.
We are capturing your questions and some that the board administration might be able to answer, some maybe not.
Grade banding is an output. We're not there. We're inputs. We're not outputs. No one ever said that grade banding was a solution. Before we ever get to anything like grade banding, it was nothing more than an idea for something that could be considered. Before we do that, we have to get the transportation audits. We have to look at exactly where all the students are in the district, and there's a lot of other steps that would have to come in inputs before we would get to an output on that.
So essentially, yes, it would be one of the options that could be considered.
Everything is potentially an option that could best address the issues of the class sizes, right? So anything that could address that, whether that would be redistricting, grade level banding, anything else to bring down those class sizes across our elementary schools, the number we have, and to provide an efficient education and that one that could be delivered to that would not negatively impact our services and programs that we deliver. So all of that, we're still at inputs. We're not at that place. And that's, I think, what happens. I know there was a reference made earlier. I think you made it as to conversations with teachers in that meeting. And I think there's educators are in the room. If you were there when that happened, could you raise your hand? Were you there? Okay, okay. Would everyone agree that no one suggested that there was any significant output, but rather a discussion about inputs is what we had? So I don't know what you heard on social media. I can tell you this, in education, for parents, for students, for educators, social media is a really tough place to be misrepresented. But that was never an intended, here we are with an outcome and a clear direction that we're going. That wasn't stated. I know, because I was the one that led that meeting.
Right, but
so,
it was discussed.
banding was discussed.
It was brought up in the room. It was not brought up by the administrative team. Is that not clear, right, for people that were there? It was brought up in the room. It was brought up by a teacher. And they said, why don't we have a clear direction on where we're going? We don't have a clear direction on where we're going because that's not where we are in the process. We're at inputs. We're not at outputs. And there's a lot of things that have to be considered. I've been through this process before. The last time we were through this process, what the community said was, go slow enough to make sure you heard us and get it right. Why we gave the information we gave tonight? Because we had almost 2,700 surveys filled out with 10,000 written responses. The areas that we gave you more information on were the areas that the community asked for more information. So that's where we are at 3A. That's why we're going to have a 3B, and we want to continue to hear from you, so I'm going to be quiet.
Is 3B what was originally going to be 3?
Why don't you answer that, Dave?
Is 3B what was represented as what we were coming for tonight?
We developed a Form 3 as the point of closure, that we wanted to bring closure, but there are so many open information items, we didn't think we could do that. Just plain and simple, it was impossible to work this group towards closure without giving you the information you requested. It's just how the process will work. When you're comfortable and we're comfortable that all the information requests have been developed and provided to you so you can digest them, then you normally move into that last form where we try to bring closure to that. So what's the last form going to look like? We're going to take each one of these items and we're going to ask questions. What's the next logical step in trying to make a decision regarding class sizes, school utilization, grade configuration, everything in that item number 1. So it could very well be, all right, we need to make certain that we have the very best data. What does that mean? We need to redo the demographic study or update the demographic study. Look at new housing developments that are in process. Look at the very latest attendance for each school. Look at birth rates. Update all that information so that we now have, and you now have, the most recent, up-to-date, reliable data to make your decision. So it could very well be, that could be an action step that we're going to develop in this decision tree. I was superintendent, I did this. I was a college president, I did this. And it's very difficult because you can't get in front of yourself, because as soon as you get in front of yourself, the process starts breaking down. So we're trying to make certain that at all times you are comfortable that you have the information you need, and we're going to be discussing that. My guess that's going to surface as an action step. We need to update the demographic study to make certain that it's not 3 or 4 years old. The world of Middletown is changing rapidly. You all know that. You live that. You live that in the highways, the ball fields, everywhere. And that could very well be an action step. And that's what Dr. George is saying, inputs. Information is critical to making the right decision. That's all we're trying to do. There's no agenda here other than don't get in front of deciding that pathway to a decision. And we are on a pathway. This decision is not being made by the board tonight or next week or next month. They're not going to get in front of this process because this is the right way to make decisions. There's right ways to make decisions and wrong ways. And the board has made a decision, and Doctor, don't get in front of doing the decision-making right way. And yes, this process is taking longer, but this is a huge group of folks, and you all have not only questions, but positions. You're looking at, all right, this is going to affect my child, and I want to make certain my voice is heard. That's why we have this forum. That's why we're going to have another forum. And I do apologize that we are slowing this process down, but that's the reason for it. This is not other than to make certain we don't get in front of that process. I don't want to take any more time because we want to get to more people. Here you go.
Thank you for bringing up the demographic study, because that is, I asked for it in the first meeting, and I'll continue to ask for an updated demographic study. But in addition to that, I noticed with the numbers in the beginning, the tax revenue, we did a straight 2% levy across the board. It was just a straight 2% year after year. And that doesn't take into account any of the new developments and all the new tax revenues going into that. So I was wondering if Anyone from the board has reached out to the township committee to get more accurate tax projections, because if we're making all these big money decisions, we should at least know what tax revenues the township is expecting to get in.
All right, so a question about most recent.
I can address that.
Oh, great.
The 2% increase on your tax levy, it's on the actual amount of the tax levy. That is, can I fit? I'm sorry. Can I please finish? It's on. That's how you calculate it. It's on the tax levy. It doesn't matter how many developments and new houses come online. All that does is change the amount that individuals may pay toward that tax levy. But the 2%, if your tax levy is $100, you can only go up to $102. That is how it is calculated. You don't get more than that if developments come on. It just impacts how it's spread out amongst all the taxpayers in town. It may decrease your tax rate, but I didn't say anything. I'm just saying that's how it works.
Yeah.
The school goes down. The town is getting
All right, I believe you're going to stay around for a little bit afterwards, maybe if there's insights there, we'll get there. All right, here we go.
Just real quickly, I think everybody needs to know that 5 years ago in the last strategic plan, banding was an action step, as well as building on, as well as redistricting, and a whole bunch of other items. It was an action step to be looked at. It was not looked at. So I don't necessarily think it's unusual to have a whole bunch of different options that can be crossed off the list quickly or whatever. But I'm just letting you know, it was there 5 years ago. They just did not act on it. They went the redistricting path. The other thing, when we start looking at enrollments, and I think people need to understand, is that we need to show people the impact of the special education students getting moved all over this district to make space whenever there's enrollment or room issues. Because when somebody says, oh, I don't want to do this, I don't want to change my bubble, if there's an issue like in Navasink, 3 or 4 special ed classrooms get thrown out to 3 or different schools where there's room. And we have children with special needs that are going through 3 elementary schools before they graduate. And it is wrong. And you all should be marching on the board for that. Okay? Thank
you. Being that the biggest issue I think we all have is the class size, I'd actually like to present a solution, a formula, something that's worked in the past. If we take, for example, Wake County, North Carolina, and I'm from New York, but I read this. They had almost an identical issue with class sizes becoming too big, people moving to North Carolina, it was getting out of control. So what they decided to do is they put in a multi-track school system. And what that did was, and everybody could read about it, I'm not an expert on it, but what it did is it kept everybody in their own school. There was no branding, there was no redistricting. It kind of shifted people on a different schedule. It kept all siblings together. Once Wake County in North Carolina was able to build the schools to accommodate the Russian population, they decided to actually stay on that system. And today, it's one of the strongest public school districts in the state as well as in the country. I think it's an option we should look at. Again, this is my first meeting, so I don't know if there have been other options that people have laid out, and we're all upset with the possibility of the class sizes getting bigger, but I definitely think it's something that we should look into. It's a multi-track school schedule, which solves the issue of keeping the class sizes small.
Thanks. Solutions are always welcome.
I teach up at another district. We're going through the same process, looking at a lot of different options. I just want to know, is that part of the process? Do you lay out options? Here's an option, here's what it costs, here's what the schools will look like. Here's another option, here's what this costs, here's what the schools will look like. Class size, all that. Are we looking at 5, 6, 8 different options? In the district I work in, that's what they're doing, and they're voting on it. If we don't like that, that's off the table. So it gives everybody a snapshot of what it could be. Is that part of the process, or is it not?
I think the answer to that is it will be a part of the process, not necessarily the strategic planning process, right? There are multiple parts of this process.
The question, is that part of the process? Is it an option?
You want me to answer? Everything's still on the table right now. Everything, we're at inputs, we're not at solutions yet, but
Are we looking at, here's option one, here's option two, here's 10 options. Here's what it costs, here's what it looks like. Is that part of the process, is my question.
the board's gonna consider all options, yes.
Options.
Yes, well, we were, as we said, even from the very beginning, when we were talking about, you know,
Not the board, the
Yeah.
public. Will the board present the options to the public? That's the question. Will the public vote on
that's what our public meetings are for. Yes, that's what our public meetings are for. Yes, absolutely. Before they vote, yes, absolutely. Yes.
Hi, my name is Kim Hicks. I live in Main Street. I have students at Bay Shore and at South. Very interesting that we go through this process every couple of years here in Middletown, and I've been to a couple of these this time around, and you know, we get into some of these third rail issues of who's going to move to what school and who's going to cross which highway. But as I read this PowerPoint before this session, among the things that I found interesting, one, and I want to make sure that I understood correctly, that we were looking at a keyword search, the results of a keyword search of the things that are in the public comment, parts of the survey responses. I would respectfully ask that we actually get a much more robust and thorough analysis of those comments, because the use of a keyword such as overcrowding or class size or technology, right? The use of the word does not necessarily convey its context. So that analysis needs to be contextual, right? So that we can all understand that. Two, the points that have been brought up about what are the options that are on the table, you know, those of us in our own work who have to do anything that's related to process improvement, as you're going through that process improvement, you collect data, you start analyzing that data, and you have some options, again, as was brought up earlier. What are the options? What stays on the table? What comes off the table? Okay, this doesn't always feel like it's the best use of everybody's time. And the other thing that I want to bring up that I certainly have questions about, and I think other people do, that was mentioned when we were looking at the assessment, the standardized assessment data, and there are questions that come up and there are actions that are taken based upon that data. What are the actions that are taken based upon that data for our schools that, fortunately, my kids were in an elementary school that always did really, really well, but what actions are taken for those schools who are not scoring as highly, right? We're right in the middle of the pack of state districts. Everybody feels great about their school, everybody feels great about their district, but statistically, we're average. We're average. We're average and really good, but we're average. So what's being done to address that across the board so that the entire district elevates together, and perhaps addressing some of those things would also decrease some of the anxiety that people do have about where might my kid be sent to school? Where might we redistrict to? How is this going to look different? So thank you for considering those things, and I'd really like to learn more about that.
So I'll just respond quickly, because I don't want to take time away from anyone who wants to still comment. But quick things, because you did ask some poignant questions. So I feel compelled to provide some answers. In terms of how we analyze the data and decisions that we might make, over the years we have shifted staff, and there's talk about eliminating specialists or interventionists. I just want to clarify that of the reading development and math specialists or interventionists at the middle school level that we currently employ, which is probably somewhere around 30 district-wide, K-8, over half of them, their salaries are funded through Title I funds. So you can't just put them in a classroom. That's not it wouldn't be applicable. So that's off the table for more than half of them. They cannot just be put in a classroom to be the lead classroom teacher. Otherwise, we'd have to absorb those salaries into a budget that, as you saw on the slides, already has a deficit. So that's not an option. The interventionists are also required as part of special ed continuum of services. It's the first stop to try to remediate deficits in a student's learning profile before they move on to possibly referral or testing or classification for additional services. So you can't just eliminate your specialists in that way. So I just wanted to provide clarification on that. So we do look at how we utilize those specialists, though, and where the needs, where the greatest need in students exist. And we have shifted personnel over the years quite drastically. For example, in Port Monmouth and Ocean Avenue, where we have some of the smallest student enrollments, we have some of the largest number of specialists to meet with the students because there's more students who have greater student achievement gaps to close. To work with them and their teachers, both in an in-class and a pull-out manner. We also look at it through the lens of, are the programs that we're currently utilizing, the resources that we're utilizing, are they supporting student growth towards the standards? So right now we're up for math readoption at the elementary level, K-5, and when we first adopted our current math program, the standards were relatively new. There were very few options that existed for the committee to consider that were aligned to the new standards, because where our cycle was in terms of readoption for our particular district fell right around the time that the new standards were released. Publishers hadn't really caught up yet. So we adopted the resource at the time that was the best option. We never proclaimed it to be the best option, and it is a resource that we use in our instruction. So right now we're in a better point in time to take a snapshot look at where our students' math progress and achievement is, to really analyze products that exist in the marketplace of curriculum to make a better informed decision as to what the needs of our students are and what products will best serve them and their teachers who need to deliver that instruction to meet those needs. So those are, I don't want to take up more time, but that's some of the ways we use the data to make decisions when it comes to staffing and curriculum adoptions and resources that we purchase as a district.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
I just want to make a couple of comments. First, I was at the two prior forums, and I actually want to thank the administration because I think there were a lot of questions that came up at the prior two forums, specifically the first one that I attended. I think there were multiple, and I think you addressed some of those questions, so I appreciate that. I also want to echo what Magali said about inclusion at the second strategic forum. I think every single group mentioned inclusive community and inclusion for the mission and the vision, and that is, it was a very, very huge missing piece. So I really hope that that can be looked at again. I think it's important for probably every one of us that we have an inclusive community, and that was left off of the vision and the mission. So I'd like that to be looked at again as well. And finally, I also just want to say that I know everyone here is very concerned about banding and redistricting, but at the prior forums, those were not issues that were discussed as things that were happening in any way, shape, or form. And I'm saying this just as a mom and a resident. I'm not defending anyone, but it really never came up as something that was happening. I think the board has been open and communicating with us about thinking and utilizing every strategy on the table. If we have an overcrowding issue and class size is too big, we have to talk about everything we can do to alleviate that. We don't have to implement everything, but we have to discuss what are the options to alleviate class size. If banding is one of those, then we have to discuss it. I'm not saying I'm for it or against it, but we have to discuss all the options. That's what I think this is about. So I just wanted to let people think about that.
Do we have an overcrowded issue? I saw enrollment was going down. Do we really, at the elementary level, have an overcrowding issue, or are we just cutting teachers? Because that is what I saw happen in Lincroft. We have the space, and you're cutting teachers. There is no increase in enrollment. So that's what I'm confused about.
I'll address that from a personnel perspective, right, from human resources perspective. So right now on the website, you can access, off the top of my head, I don't know exactly where, but probably do a search in the search menu, elementary enrollment, it'll probably come up. In August and September, we shared actual snapshot data of enrollments by school, by grade. And we showed how we, again, utilize our staffing resources. We talk about how we make decisions, right, to shift the resources we have to meet the needs of students. Right now, we're actually employing about, and don't quote me because I don't have the chart, memorized, I want to say it's about 22 excess positions in general, in classroom teachers at the K-5 level, above what our current practice for creating class sizes or maxing class sizes are. No one in the last 2 years, this includes board members and this includes administration, none of us were happy about the fact that we had to raise class sizes. We said that repeatedly. It was very begrudgingly. None of us agreed that the state in which we're currently staffing our classrooms is an adequate one or that it's acceptable. However, when the state imposed upon us reductions in our state aid, and it really put our budget off kilter, when we already had contracts in place, multi-year contracts with commitments to salary guides, capital revenue projects that needed to exist, curriculum adoptions that are required by us by the state of New Jersey, we have no choice, and some of them can exceed $1 million a year, we had to do something. There's no extra bank account you can go to withdraw funds. So we eliminated positions as we could, any excess positions that people may perceive them as. We took a lot of positions offline in the last 2 years where we could, not classroom teachers. What we did is we shifted classroom teachers to where needs were bubbling over. Because in the past, we had the luxury of just adding a contract or adding a position when classes or enrollment in a certain school required so. We're not at the place where we have the funds to be able to just add extra contracts, especially when you're operating at the elementary level, where you know that based on your total enrollment K-12 across K-5 across 12 schools, you already actually have 22 or 23 extra positions. But because of the inefficient way, perhaps that, and this is another thing you look at, the way your client base, talking about in a business perspective, a business model, because of the way it's diffused across the 12 schools, you can't consolidate them, so you have to somehow manage how you're employing your resources. So that's where our dilemma really exists right now. And no, it's not an option to continue with. We can't keep going to 30, 32 students in the class, so that's why we're here, and that's what's part of this process. What can we do to manage the funding that we have, the needs that we have, the number of students that we have, in a way that we all feel is appropriate.
Also, it was something mentioned, it was a really good point. Why can't we just add another section at a school? Whether it's, I think it's really important to say this, on both sides of town, there are classes that are at that cap. It's not something that you only have on what is considered the south side of town. So I hear over and over again, well, on the north side of town, classes are much smaller, but that's not necessarily true. There are classes that are at cap in all of our schools. And another issue with that is, depending on the capacity of the school, like I heard Lincroft, which is really section-wise is very close to capacity. It's not that you can just add another section at one grade level. Often in schools, there's multiple grade levels that are at cap, and there's not enough space left for that to be the solution. So, and the other thing is, why aren't we doing anything to address class size? You can go back year after year after year and look at our August meetings, or the summer meetings, from June all the way through the summer, where we give enrollment updates and we talk about how many sections we have at each school in each grade level and how we're shifting that. The inefficiencies of 12 elementary schools for the number of students that we have on the elementary level make that very difficult. Why grade level banding came up as a possible solution, it was when people ask for the answer, why can't we just have a more consistent number at any grade level than we have currently? Well, it's very simple. It's a math problem. Go back to that August meeting. We talked about that in Lincroft. It's a math problem. If you have one section and then you change it to 2 sections because of a cap, that section gets half. Meanwhile, in other areas of town, there are, at the same grade level, much larger numbers in that class. It's very easy to say it's a math problem. If you were to put more students in the same school, in the same grade level, you'd have more controls in keeping a more consistent class size. it was never suggested that that was the solution, because there were too many other inputs that had to come first. We would have to know what the transportation costs would be like. We would have to know exactly where all the students are and how they would shift and what it would look like. We would have to know what the companion schools are. None of that was ever considered, because we were never at outputs. We're still inputs. And going through this process for a second time, I think it was really important to learn from our past experiences. We have to go slow enough to make sure that we get all of those things right. Now, I'm sure in real time that those are reports that the board's going to start to say that we can go out and do. But also, there never was the thought that we were going to do this in this one budget cycle or this 1 year alone, because there's too many variables like state funding and all the other reports that would have to be.
Thank you. It was helpful, Dr. George. We're going to keep going here. Just one word on, you're next, so just hold on. Just one word on the inclusion issue. When we do mission and values and belief statements, we try to stay away from terms that have a legal definition, and inclusion certainly has a legal definition under the federal and state law, so we try to avoid that. But given your comments tonight, we're going to re-examine that and try to make certain that that the language we used is obvious, and if not, we will try to bolster that. So those are great comments, but I just want to give you some breadcrumbs on why that happened the way it did. Yes.
I just want to say, I think everyone's here for a very personal reason for special ed.
Mike's not working.
I think everyone's here.
Right.
I think everyone's here for a very personal reason, special ed, preaching special ed. My son's in first grade at Nut Swamp. He's one of the biggest sections in one of the most overcrowded schools. I'm here for that reason. I don't think anyone's arguing that something needs to be done and that multiple things need to be looked at. I think it's highly frustrating to come to meeting after meeting to listen to someone read a PowerPoint that I can read myself. I think what I personally want is a list of options. I want the target output. What is your target output date? How long from the target output date until the decision needs to be made, and who is involved in making those decisions? Yes, multiple decisions need to be reviewed. Multiple decisions need to be looked at, but we keep coming here and we have no target. And we keep saying, okay, the next meeting, maybe it'll be the next meeting. And then we sit through another PowerPoint, and then it's the next meeting. And it's frustrating as a mom of three little kids, my oldest in first grade, to keep coming to these meetings where we just have no timeline. Like at work, this wouldn't fly. Like you need a timeline. You need to know, okay, this is the target. What is the target? What are the options? And who's involved in helping make that decision? It's just frustrating. I know you're taking your time and we appreciate it and we're trying to get the best for all of our kids. But just a timeline and saying, okay, at this meeting we will do this would be really, really helpful. Because I feel like I've wasted a lot of time coming to these meetings where I just hear people read PowerPoints over and over and over. Can we just have a date and options and when you think the timeline of output to decision made? What is the timeline? I think that's great.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nick DeFranco. I'm one of the board members. I'm a member of the Strategic Planning Committee. I'm going to take that question. I think the best way to answer your question is to say that there is a timeline. And if the expectation was not set clearly with you and with the rest of the public, that falls on the Strategic Planning Committee, and we will do better. But this part of the strategic planning process is a school year long process. So when Dr. George talks about outputs, getting to the output stage, that's after all these inputs have been considered, that's springtime, where we will be in a position to then talk about what the gentleman in the back had said, where we start to lay out options. Whether the option is, I don't want to say the GB word because it's said too much, but maybe the option is construction. Maybe the option is some other thing that has to be done. Maybe the option is a tax levy increase. Whatever the option is, it is the those are the outputs that come from all of these inputs. And I think it was said earlier, the community has asked us time and time again to be open and transparent. I think Mrs. Rogers has done a fantastic job of saying that on social media, in our meetings, in the board meetings, that every step we take, we are going slow, as Mr. Hespy said, so that you all can keep up with us. We do not want to be in a position, I personally don't want to be in a position as a board member for somebody to come up to me at ShopRite and say, hey, you guys are making backroom deals about strategic planning, you're not listening to the public. Because I want to just do my grocery shopping. I don't want people to bother me at ShopRite and tell me that I'm doing backroom deals. But it's not the way that this board operates. This board operates transparently. And yes, that means that we're going slow. Because we're going to put PowerPoints up there where we have said we've gone through 10,000 written responses. We've read them. I've got the PDF on my phone. The board members have the PDFs. We've gone through them. We've looked at these things and we said this is what the public needs to see. Because at the end of the day, this is a matter of multiple priorities, which I think a bunch of you have said, right? Class sizes, taxes, improving the school's performance, making sure kids get good education, making sure there's equity, making sure there's inclusion. But we want to do all of these great things for our students, and I have a sophomore in high school. We want to do all these things for our students in the face of declining enrollments, inefficient enrollments between our elementary schools, declining state aid. So how do we balance all of these things? And it would be irresponsible of us to do that in the back room, or to do that quickly, or to rush to a point to say, you know what, this is it, this is what we're gonna do, let's vote on it. Because if we do that, there's gonna be a large contingent of people here at ShopRite, on the ball field, saying you guys are doing it wrong. Whereas we can have a grown-up discussion about all of these things and talk about the bad words like the grade banding and the consolidation and taxes and things like that out in the open, because we're all grown-ups and we can all do that. And I think that's what Mrs. Rogers and Mrs. Stella, and Mrs. Wright, Mr. Little, myself, that's what we want to do as board members, right? Mrs. Minguis, we want all of us to have that discussion in public. It might get heated, it might get a little ugly, but at the end of the day, we're all coming from a position of, these are our kids. This is my daughter, right? These are our kids whose educations we're planning for the next 5 years in this plan. So what's important to us? Is the tax rate important to us? Are class sizes important to us? Is increasing inclusion important to us? Let's agree upon that, our priorities as a community, and then say, okay, how do we meet those goals? How do we get to better inclusion? How do we get to smaller class sizes? And how do we do that in the context of our constraints? So again, I apologize if the expectation wasn't clear, or if you feel that this is going slow. I took my night off, as many of you did. I rushed up here from dropping my kid off at swimming. I mean, this is a sacrifice, and I really appreciate seeing everybody here. But this is a process. So I apologize, I have taken time away from everybody else, but I thought it was important to say, we appreciate, as board members, all of you sitting here, suffering through the PowerPoints, but then telling us how you feel about these things. We want this input, we want this feedback. It'll help us make better decisions, and it'll help us then turn it around to you guys in our board meetings and in our next forums to say, this is how we've synthesized the information. Are you in agreement? Good, let's go to the next step. So I'll stop talking. Thank you.
And we've read all the comments.
Yes, we
Thank you.
We've read
That's, very
all
helpful.
10,000
Not
comments.
just the keywords, yes.
Yeah, hello. I'm a relatively new resident of Middletown. I've been here about 5 years, but my daughter just started school.
Congratulations.
Sorry, I'm very happy with the schools. However, I noticed in your presentation that we are $29 million under what the state says we should be able to pay for our schools. A lot of people here are upset that our school, that our class sizes are too large. And as a former teacher, I understand exactly what that can mean. Well, there's an obvious answer, and apologies if this is one of the third rails that people mentioned before, but maybe we just need to pay more. If we are capped at the 2%, we could do this directly through bonds. We could pass bonds to expand our schools and hire more teachers. Problem solved. Am I missing something? Or is it that we just don't really want to pay what it costs to have what we want?
The only feedback I'll give on that, and would be that you can't just, what we were trying to explain with those slides is you can't just raise as much money, even if if we're going to exceed the 2%, regardless, or go over any waivers or so forth, you can't just do that. There are procedures and so forth you have to go through. If it's not something that qualifies for a waiver over the 2%, then you're talking about adding it in addition, like as a separate proposal or something along those lines that would be voted on. So you would put it out to the community. And there's even constraints on that because that has to be approved by your county superintendent and so forth. They have to tell you that they think it's necessary for you to do that. And they'll look at everything else in your budget. I'm not saying that we can't do it. I'm just saying it's not as simple as, okay, this year we need 5%, so we're going to do that. I mean, there's processes you have to go through, and that may or may not be approved. And
But is that
we know-
an option being considered? Asking to fund our schools more?
Well, it's something that could be considered.
Because it seems to me that we could have had over $4 million in the past few years that we chose not to go after. $4 million would be how many teacher years? I mean, that's a lot of teachers.
Well, and it's actually not just that 4 million, it's that 4 million compounded, because that would have been in the levy every year, and we would have collected that much more every year, plus the increase on that. But that has to be balanced against, the want to be, not taxing. I mean, that's the constant.
Which gets to the point
right, that's
that I
the
made.
constant back and
Do
forth.
we just not want to pay what we need to pay to have the teacher-student ratio that we want? And that's a question we all have to,
right, that's a community and a board decision. So.
Thank you.
Yes. Is it possible that tonight, now some people, I've heard like 3 or 4 definitely good ideas. Is it possible we can just go around tonight, put out our ideas for reducing class size, fixing the overcrowding. We put the ideas out right now tonight so that by the time we come back in January, the information is studied on all those ideas and they can be presented to us and we can actually have something happen and a decision happen. Is that possible to just put the ideas out there tonight?
Well, I think that's what's happening, and certainly anyone who has any ideas, we will stay here and we'll receive them. I just don't know how much
No, but if people
more
have
time we
ideas
have
too,
here
after
tonight,
we're
so.
done with this meeting, you could just email strategic planning. So if you so if you have a great idea, let us know tonight. That's wonderful. If you can't think of anything tonight, you can always email us at strategicplanning@middletownk12.org. It's great because it has Mrs. Stella, myself, John Little, who's the chair of strategic planning, Dr. George, and Amy on that thread. So you'll get a response from all of us together. Someone emailed us today, and it was great because we could all kind of chime in. Yeah, so if you have an idea, tell us tonight. If not, strategicplanning@middletownk12.org.
But then is it possible for those ideas that are mentioned tonight or via email soon to be studied so that we have information on?
It's going to take time.
One more. So, in a perfect world, yes, right? But in the real world, every minute, every hour spent working through an idea is a minute or hour of the administration's time that's taken away from something else. So we have to, it all comes back to balancing. We have to balance. I think what Mrs. Rogers said was the right answer. Bring forth your ideas. We want your ideas. The idea that came from Wake County, North Carolina. I had never heard of that. I'm going to go home and Google Wake County, North Carolina.
I wrote it down on my phone.
There you
It's
go.
on my
Right?
phone.
I've had people come to me and talk about, consolidation the way they do it in Virginia, where they have very large school districts, where the county is effectively a school district, and does that provide something? So I've researched that. But what we don't want to do is take time away from the administration until we've got ourselves a direction. So I agree with you. There are a lot of great ideas for reducing class sizes. We could raise taxes to solve a lot of our problems. We could do a lot of things. I think the point is to synthesize all of these into a set of priorities and direction that we want to work in. And then once we've agreed on that transparently as a community, then we start moving in that direction. So let's say that class size is the #1 priority. Great, now we can say we have allocated administration time to spend on that. This is what the community wants us to work on. Go forth and work on it. But if we go through this whole process and it turns out that class size is number 2 and inclusion is number 1, then we'll have effectively wasted time looking at class size. So it's a balancing act, and it's hard to say that we don't want ideas, because we want every idea. We want to shake all the trees. We want to hit, maybe there's a low-hanging fruit thing out there that we haven't thought of that's not high on, not budgetarily expensive, that like, oh yeah, we could have done that. We want to hear those things, but the big ideas, they cost money to study. They require approval from the board to set aside the budget to do the study. So we want to make sure that whatever we dedicate resources to is where the community wants us to go. So that's, I hope you understand my answer. So
I do, except how are we going to know if we like the idea? I mean, we want you to go there unless we're given all the information about the idea.
Because
the whole
At the hearing, that'll be at the hearing.
yeah, so when we set forth so when we've all agreed on priority, so the question was, how do we know we want to go forth on a particular idea? And I think, as Dr. George has said, executing on ideas is part of the outputs. We need to make sure the inputs are right. We need to make sure that we are focused on the right thing, and then we can talk about the ideas. So we gather the ideas in. You have a great idea for reducing class size? Great, we're not gonna chuck it in the bin. We're gonna hang on to it, and when we determine that class size is the priority, we'll start looking at that. It's a 5-year strategic plan. So even if class size is not the first priority, we may look at it next year. We may look at it the year after that. So again, this is a big picture process. This is not just how do we solve one little problem, 2 little problems. This is how do we create a sustainable Board of Education and education system for this community for the next 5 years, 10 years. That's what it's about.
By the way, give us the ideas. We could use them to tee up the conversation at the next forum. So get those ideas to us. I think that's the message. Get those ideas to us. We'll use them to tee up. We had a hand over here.
Hi, I just have a question. I understand that we're in the input phase right now, but we're moving towards the output phase. When we get to the output phase, and I think this is probably a question that everyone in the room has, it did come up a couple times, but is not really answered. When we get to the actual output phase, will there be an opportunity when different options are presented, like Mrs. Rogers had mentioned, if the community cannot come to a consensus, that a question can be added to the ballot? She's one person on the board that's suggesting that. I would imagine that would be something that needs to be voted on by the whole board. I personally would be much in favor of that. I think as a community that we, and as parents, we should be making the decisions that are going to affect our children. So adding that as a question on the ballot, specifically what to do around class size, whether it's banding or redistricting or whatever options are presented, if we narrow it down to 3 options or whatever number of options, that then the community has the option to vote on that, that's really taking us into account, not just coming to these forums and then meeting as a group of 8 or 9 people and voting on what's going to effectively affect however many thousands of children there are in Middletown. So I guess that's my question. At the end of all of this, 10,000 children, will you present the ideas and have the community vote on what they want and then go with what the majority says is their choice?
Do you want me to speak to that? I just want to say that there'll be open dialogue through this whole process. I can't speak for the board. Mrs. Rogers said that. So those are discussions that would have to happen with the board first. There would also, have to be legal advice from our board attorney. But I can tell you that no matter what direction we go, absolutely to your point, as stated by multiple board members, we want to be transparent. We want to hear from the community, and we want to make sure that we communicate directly with the community before we're at final decision or we're at 1 or 2 options.
Just to add to that, we may be required to do something if the consensus of the community is a broad stroke. So if the consensus of the community is to invest in our schools monetarily beyond what we can afford in our budget, that would require a referendum, that would require a vote, for example. So when we get to the output stage, the actions that we take will dictate how we move forward and how we get community consensus. But also keep in mind that the 9 of us on the Board of Education are elected, right? So you have, you may not have realized it, and I hope you voted for me. But if you didn't, you have another opportunity. But the idea is that we do our meetings in public, and so you're free to come to all of our meetings. They're not as exciting as this one, but you can comment on what's on the agenda. You can add points. There are a lot of folks in the audience, a lot of familiar faces that do this on a monthly basis, and we do take that into account, and then we stay afterwards to meetings to talk. So we're a very accessible. You can find me at ShopRite, as I said. We're very accessible. And we're happy to have this dialogue. And then when we get to the outputs, we would have failed if we are perceived to be doing something that is not in the best interest in the community and that the community is not aware of. We'll have failed. And so I don't plan on failing. I know Mrs. Rogers doesn't plan on failing. Yeah. So you have our word that we will move forward on this together in public, and you will be aware of everything that we're doing. I think that's the best we can do.
So I actually want to echo your sentiments about people attending meetings, because this actually wouldn't be happening if people would attend the town meetings regarding the new developments coming up, being developed. If everyone would have voiced their opinions then, maybe we wouldn't have this issue. So thank you for everything. I'm very angry about everything as well, but you have to put up or shut up. Get there, we'll be heard, things will change.
I just want to say about the developments, everything that's in our last, when it comes to what's coming online right now, the developments, was in our last demographic study. So, and if you were to look at the 10-year state report data that we put up, I think it's actually 11 years, is it 11 years? That's the October 15th report, and you were to compare that to the demographic study, those numbers are really close. They're within a couple, 1 or 2 percentage points. So they're valid, they're reliable, and we do have data on what's coming online with, construction and building in the town, just so we know, because that's a misperception.
When we were in the last 2 forums, we talked about our love for our neighborhood schools. Middletown is unique. We have lots of small little towns in one big town, one big united Middletown. But we love our neighborhood schools, and that was, I thought, to be a part of our belief system, but I didn't see it there. And I think that we should include that and take a look at that, as well as the inclusion, because I think that those are 2 big pieces that our town believes in, and I think should help drive the decision making by our board.
Absolutely. We're over an hour and well past our time, so we're going to stay. If you have any other questions, I'm going to let Dr. George and the board close us out tonight.
Thank you all for coming. Please stay engaged. Please come back to Forum 3B. More excitement in the future. Please email us strategicplanning@middletownk12.org.